This week on In the Field is a perfect example of the compositional technique of framing. Hi everybody, welcome to In the Field. My name is Scott Davenport, and this week I'm back out at Balboa Park. I'd say a couple of months ago, I went out to Balboa Park with a certain idea about how I wanted to take a photo of the Museum of Man. I wrote about this on my blog. Long story short, it didn't really work out the way I'd wanted. So I went out again for another crack at the museum, and I found a different composition I hadn't tried before, and it was a perfect example of the compositional technique of framing, using something in the environment to put a frame around your subject. So let me show you Balboa Park on the maps and then some footage from the shoot. So here is downtown San Diego, and Balboa Park is this nice big huge green area here. And if I zoom in, you've got this big long bridge and then the Museum of Man here. Let me switch over to the satellite, let the machine catch up. So here is the Museum of Man, this big old building right here. Let me switch to 3D so you can get a good look at this guy. And it's really cool. It's got this nice spire, there's a really intricate door. And what I did, let me rotate around here and see if we can see these. We can. Here are some archways underneath this side of the building. And so I set myself up way down here. And then if you can imagine being rotated around and looking up at this museum using the arch to frame the shot. Let me just show this to you with actual video from the outing. I'm in Balboa Park, shooting at the Museum of Man, trying a different angle than my last visit here. And I'll show you on the camera here. I'm down very, very low. You can see I'm using a very wide angle lens and framing it so that this arch kind of frames the museum in the picture itself. And so now just playing with a few different exposures. Right now I'm about a minute to keep the ISO nice and low. And the only thing I'm a little concerned about is this particular lamp right here. I'm going to see how garish that gets in the longer exposures. I might need to do some additional shots to clean that up. There's a lot more activity out here than normally on an early morning, and it looks like they're setting up for some type of fair today. And there's this cool looking robot dude that's taken over the main square. I'm going to get a few shots of him. Saying one more goodbye to Robbie the robot here before I head out from Balboa Park. The sun's come up beautifully, and the sky filled in shortly after sunrise, so it's nice to have a little bit of clouds as a backdrop. And trying to angle this guy up so it almost looks like kind of a Godzilla type thing, something coming in and stomping all over the Balboa Park, or The Day the Earth Stood Still, one of those classic sci-fi movies. But this has been a nice treat. A little fair setup. It's been fun. I was much happier with this visit to the park and getting a nice shot of the museum than I was on the previous one for sure. And as a bonus, there was a fair that was being set up for. So I'm there between 6 and 7 a.m. and there was this 50-foot robot that was in the center of the park. Well, that's not going to be there again. So I spent a bunch of time taking photos of it, and it just reminded me of the 1950s type sci-fi movies of invaders from Mars, or robot people take over the planet. It was just really, really cool. So the tip of the week is looking for ways to naturally frame your subject. In this case, it's an archway that's encasing the museum, and you can see the processing's a little bit interesting on this one, a little teaser for what you'll see later this week and in post. But it could be anything, framing-wise. A person walking past a doorway, or a shot through a window showing a different scene where the window frames what your subject is. It's a compositional technique that I tend to forget, and I was very happy that I didn't forget it on this visit to Balboa Park. Before we wrap up, let me answer one of your questions. So Tim wrote in asking a question about straight lines in architecture, and let me just read what Tim said. He posts on other sites for critiques of his work, and usually the first thing I get hit on is for this: it's not straight. So Tim, here's my take on architecture photos. You can see on this one here, it's quite distorted. I'm shooting at a wide angle lens and I'm very close to this archway. And so, yeah, the arch is not straight. And I think when you're shooting on an angle, that's okay. I kind of like the sweeping diagonals of this arch, or it could also be on any type of building if you're shooting it on a corner. And it adds a little more a dynamic feel to the photo. So I personally don't have an issue with straight lines of a building not being perfectly straight, depending on your framing. Now I will back off too much distortion. A few in the field in post episodes ago, I did exactly that with a shot in Madrid where the street scene and the buildings were just bending in too much. That didn't look good. Now a place you really want to be careful about straight lines is when you're shooting straight onto a building or you're looking for symmetry. That's where it's really important to get your perspective correction accurate. Do as much as you can with the camera, but you may be tilting up or down depending on the subject you're shooting at, and so you can use things like Photoshop or Lightroom to go and correct those things after. So I think it all just depends on what you're trying to convey with the photo, and I'm not a stickler for making sure that every building and every line is perpendicular. I hope that helps you, and thanks very much, Tim, for sending in that question. That is it for this week in the field. I hope you've enjoyed it and picked up a tip or two you can use on your next photo outing. If you've got questions, I would love to hear from you. You can contact me through my website. Twitter's a good bet. I've been spending a lot of time on Instagram, so if you're on Instagram, look me up, share some photos, tag me. It'd be good to see some of your work. And until next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Happy shooting.